If you've been online in the past 2 weeks, you've probably seen some discourse around the fact that for the first time since 1990, there were no hip-hop songs in the Billboard Top 40. And while it's becoming harder and harder every day to tell what's real and what's not on the internet, this was true. For the week of November 1st, 2025, the highest charting hip-hop song on the Billboard charts was NBA YoungBoy's Shot Callin' at number 43. This has led to a lot of wondering aloud about whether or not hip-hop's reign at the forefront of American pop culture has come to an end. Let's look at some of the headlines across music media. The new Rory and Mal podcast posted a clip from a recent episode titled, "Hip Hop is Officially Dying." The YouTuber Hello Yassine dropped a video last month called "Numbers Don't Lie. Hip Hop is Dead in 2025. There have been countless tweets and Instagram infographics, Vice think pieces even in the big 2025, informing everyone of the funeral and telling them that in lieu of flowers, they should go watch their monetized content. I guess in some ways it's hypocritical for me to pick on them because I'm also making a video on it. But before we start eulogizing a genre, I want to be clear about where I'm going with this. I do not think hip hop is dead. As a fan and a follower of the genre for like 2 decades at this point, and also someone who spends a lot of their free time learning about the industry and silly Billboard rules, what I want to do today is explain how these charts work and get into if it really means anything at all, and see if there's any insights we can take away about the state of hip-hop and music in general in 2025. So if you're looking for a video that's going to be more like higher level about the state of hip-hop in terms of like its content and the overall direction of the genre, there are plenty of other voices on YouTube that I think would do a really good job getting into that. One creator I really like is Open Mike Eagle, who's a very accomplished rapper himself. Another guy, Eric the Young God, highly recommend checking him out. He's done 2 videos recently that I think are like analogous to this, but not the exact same. One being about the de-radicalization of black music, and the other one being about young rappers not being cool anymore. Or apparently you could follow the DC movie director James Gunn, who is for some reason really tapped in with underground rap music, as we all found out on the internet this past week. Now, there are a couple immediate things that I want to point out about the top 40 that everyone's talking about. For one, R&B, another genre that people love to say on the internet is dead, is doing really well. Leon Thomas is a burgeoning star, and his song Mutt is at its peak so far at number 10. Chris Brown and Bryson Tiller are on here. Raven Lenae and her song Love Me Not is right there, hanging on at 24, after peaking as high as 5. Kehlani is at 14 with Folded, and Mariah the Scientist rounds it out at 37. And this is without counting Justin Bieber's Daisies or Yukon, which I think if you wanted to view them as R&B songs, especially Yukon, you probably could. Also, while there may not be a straightforward rap song in this top 40, there are multiple songs on here that remind us that whatever is cool in hip-hop or was cool in the past 2 or 3 years in hip-hop ends up getting sopped up by other genres, like pop and even country. The K-pop Demon Hunters song How It's Done at 28 features 2 rap verses, and their song Takedown, that's at 34, has 1. Now, I'm not saying these songs are gonna like scratch the itch of a Griselda fan, but like, they are rap verses. Chris Brown's song has a triplet drill hi-hat pattern, and the number 21 song Morgan Wallen and Tate McRae's What I Want has something that resembles trap drums, which is also pretty common in Morgan Wallen's music. Not that I'm in his fan base, I don't know what that fan base is called. I've only listened to his music for the sake of making YouTube videos, but he does love trap drums. These songs are not rap songs, but they do contain production elements that are unmistakably from hip-hop. But with that being said, how do we end up with 0 straight-up rap songs on the top 40? Is this the end of hip-hop's dominance? Or is this what a Reddit millennial might call a nothing burger? Today, I'm gonna put on my historian hat and try to figure it out. But first, if you like videos on music like this one, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe. I post a video every week. If you want to see them early, go to my Instagram, HADJI Gaviota, throw me a follow, and join my broadcast channel. I post all my videos in there 1 day early for free. Also, my group Elmjack has a project coming out on November 14th, this Friday, called Funk Tape. If you like this instrumental, and probably a lot of the other instrumentals in the video, it should give you an idea of what it sounds like. The pre-save link is in the bio. It really helps. So I would appreciate one of those if you're feeling what it sounds like. Let's get into it. So the stat going around is that this is the first Billboard Top 40 to not have a hip-hop song in it since 1990. Those who are into history know that the birth year of hip-hop is 1973, which would mean that the era of commercial dominance for the genre, at least in terms of Billboard charts, would really start 17 years after those first hip-hop parties in the community room at 1520 Sedgwick Ave in the Bronx. But something very, very, very important happened in 1991 that shifted the way that these charts were looked at, and that's Nielsen SoundScan. You remember before everybody ordered everything on Amazon and Uber Eats that you'd actually have to like go in a store and buy something? But in the store, the cashier rings up the item with the barcode on the back. You know, the thing on the cover of that one Pusha T album? In 1991, album sales became officially tracked using that technology. So the stores would scan the albums as they sold them, and then those numbers would be registered and recorded and sent to the labels and sent to Billboard and saying, hey, this is exactly how many copies you sold. You might ask, what were they doing before that? Well, the record companies would get on the phone with the stores and be like, hey, how many did you sell? And then some store manager was giving them a number. And who knows if it was accurate or not. I can't imagine every retail manager in 1985 really cared how many copies of Michael Jackson's Bad they sold that week. Maybe the manager was a fan of an artist and they would just pump the numbers up. Or maybe they hated an artist and they pumped them down. Or in a more sinister manner, and this was something that did really happen according to a lot of firsthand sources, those store managers were getting some kickbacks from the labels to report the numbers that the labels actually wanted them to report, inflating or deflating the numbers to fit whatever narrative they were trying to push. And one of the narratives that they weren't necessarily interested in pushing was the popularity of hip hop, and I'll let you fill in the blanks on why. The first rap album to top the Billboard charts was the Beastie Boys' License to Ill in 1987. No rap albums did so in 1988. In 1999, Tone Loc's album Loked After Dark did, and that was it. In 1990, it was only MC Hammer and Vanilla Ice who achieved the #1 album in hip-hop, and none of these albums achieved that status in their first week of release. So it was just word of mouth after the release, or maybe just a quiet week where they were able to overtake the album from the last week before that, but none of these albums went #1 in their first week. SoundScan went into effect in June of 1991, and the first hip-hop album to hit #1 came that first week it was in effect. NWA's second album, whose title I will not be reading. It was during the album's second week, and it actually was the second highest selling album in its first week. Now that the numbers were truly accurate, it took the first spot, and it actually was also an independent release, which is pretty impressive. And wouldn't you know that after Nielsen SoundScan went into effect, it became way more common for a hip-hop album to go #1. In 1996, 6 out of the 21 albums that went #1 that year were hip-hop albums. In 1997, 8 hip-hop albums went #1. It's not a coincidence that hip-hop started scoring a lot of #1s after the Nielsen SoundScan revolution. And it didn't just happen to hip-hop. It happened to multiple genres that were once looked at as niche: country, metal, R&B, alternative rock, anything that wasn't pop or more mainstream rock. It's also true that these changes in the 1990s coincided with the careers of some of the most commercially successful and memorable hip-hop stars of our time. But it's also important to remember that hip-hop was powerful, widespread, and making a cultural impact in the 1980s as well. From a chart perspective, it's clear that 1991 is the moment where hip-hop is accepted by the mainstream music industry as a part of the musical canon. But hip-hop was thriving before then too, and I think that's really important to remember when we look at today. As just kind of a reminder that Billboard charts don't always measure impact. And in the time between 1991 and now, those charts have changed quite a bit. In 1998, Billboard changed the name of their Hot 100 singles chart to just Hot 100, signifying that songs no longer had to be released as singles to qualify for the Hot 100. Back when people were actually buying music in stores, record labels used to release singles, like CDs and vinyl that had 1, 2, 3, 4 songs on them, maybe remixes, A-side, B-side type situation, so that people could spend like $2 or $3 to decide if they liked the song and then maybe wanted to come back and buy the whole album. So before 1998, it was possible for a song to be heavily requested on the radio, but not actually for sale as a single, and then those songs would not be eligible for the Billboard Hot 100 singles chart. Some famous examples include Stevie Wonder's Isn't She Lovely or Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven, songs that are so iconic that you probably heard at least one of them in your head when I said them, but they were never on the Hot 100 during their heyday. Labels may have even preferred for the popular song to not be a single, because that meant people were going to go to the stores and buy the whole album and thus give the company $10, $12, $15 instead of giving them 2 or 3 for the single. So in 1998, Billboard looked at what was going on and they said, I guess it doesn't really make sense for us to not count these songs, so they changed the rules, something that they do pretty frequently. After 1998, songs like Smash Mouth's All-Star and NSYNC's Bye Bye Bye, which were never commercially released as singles, became top 10 hits, and the rise of the internet was right around the corner, ready to shake things up all over again. Once people could download whatever songs they wanted, the concept of the single became even more irrelevant. On iTunes, for most albums, you could just spend 99 cents or later $1.29 to just get whichever song you wanted if you didn't want to buy the whole thing. So people were buying whichever songs they wanted on the internet, and they didn't necessarily coincide with which songs the labels thought would be the most popular or which ones they even released as singles before the album came out. And things got even crazier once streaming became the main form of consumption. It was easy enough to count a digital download on iTunes as a sale, but what do we call a stream? They needed to come up with something, because into the 2010s, less and less people were buying music every year. And the system that they came up with is definitely a system. The exact Hot 100 formula is protected like the Krabby Patty secret formula, but basically they add up radio play, streams, actual sales, and then divide those numbers by some secret Colonel Sanders ratios to produce a list of a Hot 100 songs. And here's where it gets really spicy, and it's really important for us when we look back at the Billboard chart that everyone's talking about. Not all streams are made equal. Billboard differentiates between paid streams, free streams, video streams, and programmed streams. So paid streams are Spotify Premium, Apple Music, and you just go and click on whichever songs you want. Those are paid streams. Free streams, video streams, are gonna be people who have the free Spotify account with ads, or people who are watching YouTube videos. Programmed streams are things like Pandora, where it's like you click on a radio station of sorts and then it feeds you songs and you're not actually individually picking those songs out. What this means is that artists who are streaming really highly on Spotify and on Apple Music and are more likely to have a fan base that have paid accounts, maybe they skew older and a little wealthier, they're more likely to be represented in the Billboard Hot 100 than artists who are running it up on YouTube, where those are classified as free streams or video streams, and each of those views counts less than a paid Spotify stream. And nobody has a bigger YouTube audience than NBA YoungBoy, whose song is at number 43 this week. And that's not hyperbole. YoungBoy was the #1 artist on YouTube during that same counting period of the Billboard chart that we're talking about. He got almost 54 million views that week. And the second highest artist, Fuerza Regida, had only 29 million. Taylor Swift, for example, had half the YouTube views that NBA YoungBoy did that week. And you would imagine off those numbers only that Taylor Swift would have less chart representation than NBA YoungBoy. But instead, she doesn't just have the #1 song, or 2 songs on the chart, or 3 songs on the charts. She has 12 songs on the Billboard Top 40, not the Hot 100, in the Top 40. 30% of the Billboard Top 40 is Taylor Swift. This is because Taylor Swift released her album The Life of a Showgirl last month, and Taylor fans, much like NBA YoungBoy fans, are ride or die. They just ride on a different platform. And the industry has decided that one of those platforms is worth more than the other. Also, shout out to Z from DJ Booth for talking about this as well. I think it's really important information, something that I didn't even really fully realize the extent of until I saw his tweet. Taylor's chart dominance this week is an example of what happens when an A-list artist releases a hotly anticipated album, thanks to all the rule changes that we've talked about with singles. In a pre-streaming world, Taylor could have never done this, because there's no way an artist was gonna release 12 singles for an album, right? So the top 40 that we're comparing in 2025 to the ones in the 90s and the 2000s are just fundamentally very different. But today, if all 12 of those songs are getting heavily streamed, then all 12 of them are gonna chart. And this is not uniquely a Taylor Swift thing. When Kendrick Lamar's GNX came out in 2024, here was the first Billboard Hot 100 update. #1, Squabble Up. #2, TV Off. #3, Luther. #4, Whacked Out Murals. #5, and the best song on there, by the way, Hey Now. The entire GNX album was in the top 40. The lowest ranking song was at 27. And we're talking about an album that has like a posse cut with a bunch of rappers that nobody outside of LA was familiar with. That's going top 40 with these new rules. When a marquee A-list hip-hop album like that releases, the entire thing can flood the charts the same way that Taylor's album is currently doing. So the issue is not that the demand is gone for a big hip-hop release. In fact, I'd argue it's the opposite. I think Kendrick's dominance is showing us that the audience really wants these A-list hip-hop releases. For example, and not to start any Stan Wars, I think if Drake dropped Iceman, surprise drop on Friday, it's like that would probably clog up the top 40 the next week because people would be fascinated and curious what they would get, especially if the album is really good. But the problem is, after Kendrick, after Drake, maybe a couple more people, like who else is going to be able to do that? Jay-Z released his album The Blueprint 3 in 2009. It was his 11th studio album and it came out a month or two before his 40th birthday. He had already done the now classic rapper trope of saying he was going to retire just to come back with his 2006 album Kingdom Come and his well-received 2007 album American Gangster. With his third album back, The Blueprint 3, he decided to shoot for the stars, producing one of the biggest hits of his career, if not the biggest, Empire State of Mind,
Concrete jungle, wet dream tomato.
He also made what felt like a concerted effort to appeal to the youth, even declaring on to the next one that if you want his old shit, you could buy his old album. And I mean, there were 10 of them, so a lot to choose from. One of the ways that he went about appealing to the youth was featuring a lot of the young rappers who were deemed to be the next guys up. Drake, Kid Cudi, and J. Cole all have prominent feature roles on the album. And guess what? They would go on to be some of the most commercially successful artists of the 2010s. And following the Blueprint 3, Hov has only released 2 solo studio albums, 444 and Magna Carta Holy Grail. He's in the twilight of his career, just popping out whenever he feels like it, doing a guest verse here or there just because he wants to, hanging out with his wife. His job is done. And today, rappers like Drake, Kendrick Lamar, J. Cole, by the established hip-hop career graph, should be around their Blueprint 3 eras. I'll be the first one to tell you age doesn't really matter, but they are about the same age that Hov was when he dropped Blueprint 3. And they've all individually already achieved pretty much everything that there is to achieve. Kendrick just did the Super Bowl. Drake is like competing with Michael Jackson for these records. Cole's been putting on his own festival, running a label, podcasting about the old days of his career like he's kind of already done most of his work. And if they were gonna drop their Blueprint 3 style album today, who would they feature? Because there aren't many artists that are just universally agreed upon as the next guys. I can tell you as a kid who was in middle school and high school during that Blueprint 3 era, it was like, there were lists going around. People would hotly argue about the XXL freshman list and be like, ooh, no, it should be him. It should be him. This guy's so next. I can't wait for his debut album. Oh my God, his studio single kind of stinks. People like Drake, Kendrick, and Cole were constantly getting thrown into the media with everyone deciding if they were really worthy of that status or not. And it's not that there aren't a lot of really talented rappers around right now. It's really that hip hop has gotten so big that there's multiple niches and pockets of the genre that are all kind of thriving in their own way, even if there isn't one guy thriving to the same level as an early career Drake, an early career Kendrick or Cole. And even in those 15 years since the Blueprint 3, let's think about how much hip hop has changed. Imagine you were a Rolling Stones fan in the 1960s. By the time the 80s came around, you might like Metallica, but if you listen to them back to back, they don't sound very similar. Today, we just call them both rock music. Think about someone who liked J. Cole in 2009, 2010. Would they necessarily like Ken Carson in 2025? They might, but the pockets of the genre are so different, and it's because the umbrella has gotten larger. It's not because the industry is collapsing. I think this is part of the reason why there are no obvious, clear A-list stars ready to just take it and run with it. And algorithms are a big part of that too. Everyone is just fed whatever pocket they like the most. Even if you look at the artists who became A-listers after the Drake, Kendrick, and Cole era, I'm talking about Tyler, the Creator, Travis Scott, Playboi Carti. They all were around pre-algorithm as well, and I think that's a big reason why they were able to get to where they're at. But these pockets of hip-hop that I'm talking about, they can thrive without #1 Billboard dominance. Honestly, there's so much music out there that sometimes it feels overwhelming. It's not like there's a lack of good hip-hop, but at the same time, there's this overarching feeling of a power vacuum because none of the guys are rising to that crazy bar that we've set in a time that just doesn't exist anymore. So I think the question that people need to ask is, does hip hop need to be there? The dark cloud hovering over this conversation is that a bunch of the artists that maybe could have taken that step to A-list stardom are no longer with us. Juice WRLD, Pop Smoke, XXXTentacion, Mac Miller, Nipsey Hussle, Lil Peep, Lil Keed, so many more of them were taken away from us before they had a chance to really spread their wings. I wonder if I'd even be making a video like this if half of those guys were still alive. But overall, I think this conversation is more of a reflection of the way that Billboard measures things than it is like a damnation of the state of hip hop. The top 40 is incredibly fickle, and artists can just hog up 30% of it with one album like Taylor Swift did. With that being said, there is definitely room for a young hip hop artist to step up and move into that A-list. I do think there's a space for that. The key question is if they want to, because I don't know if they have to in 2025. It does feel like there's a fatigue with the current state of A-list mainstream hip-hop, especially after the Drake and Kendrick beef. The people are clamoring for something new, and I think the truth is, it's right there, and they don't even have to go that far under the surface. There are so many successful pockets of lyrical hip-hop, guys like Saba, Smino, No Name, and there's an exciting crop of artists coming right behind them, people like Chris Patrick, Ruben Vincent, Marco Plus, Black Sam. Then there's the high-energy, rage-adjacent guys, Osama Sun, Che, the Opium Label. You get into the underground, you get to guys like Nine Vicious, Tezis, Xavier So Based. It's my view that hip-hop is so big and self-sustaining now, with direct-to-fan opportunities like what Mick Jenkins does on Even, touring opportunities, merch. Most of these artists can make long-term careers kind of serving their fan bases and not worrying about having to cross over. Because when you really push to go extra mainstream, you tend to sacrifice a little bit of your integrity. When you listen to J. Cole talk about making music that he hated while searching for a hit single early in his career, or when you watch someone like Kendrick jump on a remix of a Taylor Swift song because it's obviously something that will be good for his career, it makes you wonder if those artists should have to cross over at all. What I think instead there needs to be is a better funnel between the fans and the talent. We saw when Chris Patrick and Marco Plus went on Kai Cenat's stream that the predominantly younger audience was super receptive to these more lyrical guys. They just need to be met where they're at, and if the youth is going to be consuming content, then we need people who can make engaging and fresh and interesting content that also shows them good music. No disrespect to legacy media companies, but the kids are not clicking on Rolling Stone articles or complex articles. They're not clicking on articles at all. They're reading infographic screenshots on Instagram that might not even really be articles. But the issue is content creators are incentivized to post things that they think are going to get clicks, and like the Drake and Kendrick beef is going to get them way more clicks than here's this cool rapper I just found. It's kind of like the I got the job meme. And audiences say they want new artists, they say that they're bored of hip hop, but they still click on slop. This is why I want to shout out creators like A1234. I've never had to say that out loud. A1234, A1234. You know what I mean. And Tia Ho, who are doing a great job in short form content of posting really interesting, attention grabbing, but in-depth and creative ways of showing new artists to people. I like to think I'm holding it down on the long form end, but I think I should probably start dipping my toes into some short form content as well. So let me know if you guys want to start seeing that, besides the stuff that I do with Pigeons and Planes already. One piece of the conversation that I didn't do in this video and I thought about doing, but then I realized probably needs to be its own video, is comparing where hip hop is at to where rock music was at, because this is such a common thing that I see on the internet. Hip hop is going out just like rock. And it's like, I don't even really know the answer, but I would love to do the research and compare them and really try to get to the bottom of that. If that's a video that you want to see, let me know in the comments. And let me know what else you want me to cover. See you next week. Peace.